In this module, we introduce the political primacy issues and take you through your first political checkup.
All humans have the same basic natural needs. When talking about the ability of individuals to flourish, there are two life-flourishing conditions required for a good life. The first are the internal conditions required by ethics. These are the things that sustain and promote your own personal life. The second are the external conditions required by politics. These are the things that sustain and promote the lives of everyone. Ethics and politics are the twin branches of moral philosophy. Ethics deals with the right habits of my good private life. Politics deals with the right habitat of a good society that affects me. Private morality is for guiding individual choices. Public governments are for securing and protecting individual rights. Ethics provide the moral code for making a good human. Just laws provide the code for making a good society. Both the ethical component and the political component influence each other. The individual affects the society, and the society affects the individual. A one-word summary to help remember the ethical component is virtues. A one-word summary to help remember the political component is rights.
Elder George Q. Cannon said,
"It is in politics as in religion. There are a great many men who make a profession of politics, professing to understand, to act upon, and to stand upon certain political principles which are embodied in their platforms, of which, however, they are really ignorant."
President John Taylor said,
If we look at the very foundation of government, we may inquire, how were governments formed? Who organized them, and whence did they obtain their power? It is a subject for deep thought and reflection, and one that very few have understood. We have got to establish a government upon the principle of righteousness, justice, truth, and equality, and not according to the many false notions that exist among men.
Do you agree very few understand politics? Various politicians and political parties may use similar words, but often have a different meaning attached to the word itself. Not understanding the context of a particular word being used leads to dangerous ignorance. To what branch of philosophy does truth belong? Epistemology. To what branch of philosophy does righteousness belong? Ethics. To what branch of philosophy does justice and equality belong? Politics. What branch is philosophically presupposed in all of these statements? Metaphysics or objective reality? If you get metaphysics wrong, if you get epistemology wrong, if you get ethics wrong, what are the chances you are going to get your politics right? We are ready now to introduce Eternalism's political primacy issues and take our second philosophical checkup. Remember from our first philosophical checkup that primacy issues are about putting first things first, that is, putting things in their proper order or sequence. Also, remember that the pair of words listed are not an either-or choice. The primacy issue is simply which principle comes first in sequence. For the following pair of Tier 1 and Tier 2 status issues, please pause this video for a moment and circle the choice that you think gets the political primacy issue correct. For the first political primacy issue, man-state or state-man, Eternalism claims that the individual has primacy over the state. Man represents the first three branches of philosophy. The state comes in only later in the higher fourth philosophical branch of politics. Getting this primacy issue wrong leads to statism or authoritarianism. For the second political primacy issue, Eternalism claims that right has primacy over might. Getting this primacy issue wrong leads to either the tyrannical force of dictatorship or the mob rule tyranny of anarchy. For the third political primacy issue, Eternalism claims the individual has primacy over the group. Individual represents the first three branches of philosophy. The group society comes in later, in the higher fourth philosophical branch of politics. Getting this primacy issue wrong leads to collectivism or socialism. For the fourth political primacy issue, Eternalism claims liberty has primacy over equality. In the context we are using liberty, both of these concepts arise in the fourth branch of politics. Getting this primacy issue wrong leads to egalitarianism, which is another way of saying forcible equality of outcomes rather than providing for equality of opportunity. If you missed any of these from your own answers, hopefully this piques your curiosity to understand Eternalism's claim. In coming modules, we will provide evidence to substantiate why Eternalism chose each of these primacy issues.
James Madison said,
"Justice is the end of government. It is the end of civil society. It ever has been and ever will be pursued until it be obtained, or until liberty be lost in the pursuit.
Nearly every political theorist agrees with James Madison that the proper role or end purpose of government is to establish justice. The only thing that can truly unify us is our understanding of justice. This idea is embodied in the preamble of the Constitution, which describes its two purposes: to establish unity and to establish justice. However, there is major disagreement over what justice itself means. What do you mean by justice? There are actually 3 different definitions of justice. These 3 different definitions potentially divide society into 3 separate groups, each in conflict with each other. Each of these 3 definitions attempt to define a different answer on the foundational role of government in establishing justice. The first says the foundation of justice is enforcing the laws of the society. This is called the positive law definition of justice. The second says the foundation of justice is promoting the social good of society. This is called the social good definition of justice. The third says the foundation of justice is securing the natural rights of individual citizens. This is called the natural rights definition of justice. Do you see any problems with any of these different ways of determining justice? Where is the conflict? All 3 of these definitions, to one degree or another, can be supported by Latter-day Saint scriptures. Don't we believe in obeying the laws of the land? Don't we believe in maintaining a good society? Don't we believe in individual rights? The devil in the details of these 3 definitions of justice is crucial to understand, because each definition gives a separate and conflicting answer to the question of what does or does not constitute the proper role of government. We will discuss each of these definitions in turn and try to determine which one we believe has primacy in the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. If we are to unify as Latter-day Saints, we need to do it based on the primacy of one of these 3 theories. For a house divided cannot stand.
Let's start first with the positive law definition of justice. Mortimer Adler said,
"The positivist theory of justice claims that unjust acts are those prohibited by positive law, just acts are those prescribed by it. Spelled out, this means that what is just or unjust is determined solely by whoever has the power to lay down the law of the land." It also leads to a corollary, which inexorably attaches itself to that conclusion, that might makes right. This is the very essence of absolute or despotic government.
According to the positive law theory, justice is conformity to the law. There is a hidden philosophical pitfall in this, because it means whatever is legal justifies the use of coercive force on the part of the government to enforce the laws. What happens if the legal system makes it legal to disenfranchise part of society, such as the Nuremberg laws, racial segregation laws, or the Missouri extermination order? If the law can disenfranchise any one minority segment of society, what's to stop it from doing it to anyone else? The primacy issues for the positive law definition of justice mean in practice that might makes right. The force of law by definition is right and must be obeyed. This also means that the state has primacy over the individual, or that laws, regardless if they are good or evil toward particular individuals, determine justice. This absolutism of law mirrors the outlook of absolute dictators throughout history who represent the full might of the state invested into a single person. One form of this theory is the divine right of kings, which is the idea that the king not only is above the law, but that the king is the law. You could substitute any modern absolute dictator in the place of kings, and the idea is the same. Here are some examples. King George III of the United Kingdom said,
"I wish nothing but good. Therefore, everyone who does not agree with me is a traitor and a scoundrel. When the unhappy and deluded multitude against whom this force will be directed shall become sensible of their error, I shall be ready to receive the misled with tenderness and mercy."
King Louis XVI of France said,
"L'État c'est moi. I am the state."
An alternative translation is, "It is legal because I wish it." Doesn't Article of Faith 12 command us to be subject to kings, presidents, rulers, and magistrates? Is revolution against such authoritarianism justified as part of Latter-day Saint doctrine? Are we commanded to love our enemies and turn the other cheek no matter what? Brigham Young said,
"When misuse of power has reached a certain stage, the divinity that is within the people asserts its right and they free themselves from the power of despotism."
The command to be subject to kings and rulers cannot be taken in an absolute sense. There are certain conditions mentioned in Doctrine and Covenants 134:5 that apply. We believe that when the misuse of power has reached a certain destructive stage, mankind has a right to reclaim their lost rights. This is one reason why, without justice, God would cease to be God. To illustrate the different definitions of justice, let's consider the revolutions that were launched against the following absolute rulers in response to their injustices under the positive law definition of justice. These different revolutions were dependent, first and foremost, on the distinct theory of justice each adhered to. The main political worldview fundamentally changed over this period of history, where the positive law view of politics was mostly abandoned in favor of the remaining two theories of justice. The revolution against King George III of Great Britain took a very different direction and different outcome from the revolutions against King Louis XVI of France and Tsar Nicholas of Russia. Reviewing how these revolutions were implemented showcases our coming study of the very real, practical consequences of the conflicting definitions of justice. The American Revolution was founded with the motivating principle of individual liberty, with a foundation in the natural rights definition of justice. The natural rights definition of justice states that the individual has primacy over the collective group, that rights determine justice, and individual liberty has primacy over equality. Symbols such as the Liberty Bell aesthetically represent this revolution. Part of the inscription on the bell reads from Leviticus 25:10, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." Aesthetically, the toll of the bell symbolizes the voice of freedom, broadcast openly and uninhibited to all the independent inhabitants of the land. The bell rang when the Continental Congress signed the Declaration of Independence, and then again on July 8, 1776, to invite the citizens of Philadelphia for the reading of the Declaration of Independence. While the American Revolution gave primacy to liberty over equality, the French and Russian revolutions gave primacy to equality over liberty. Consequently, these revolutions were not fought on a basis of individual natural rights, and the outcome was very different. Although the French and Russian revolutions differed in the means that they implemented equality, they both were rooted in primacy of consciousness and the social good definition of justice. That is, the collective group has primacy over the individual, that the greatest good of the collective determines justice. For the social good definition of justice, equality amongst the group has primacy over individual liberty. Although the motto for the French Revolution proclaims liberty, equality, and fraternity, or egalitarianism, the practical result was the Reign of Terror, 1793 to 1794, in which an estimated 16,594 official death sentences were issued. Symbols such as the guillotine represent the bloody French Revolution. Although the propaganda from the Soviet Communist government always showed an optimistic, smiling collective of the working class people with a hammer and sickle, the reality was embodied in the symbol that the rest of the world has come to know, the Gulag. The Gulag was the acronym for the government agency in charge of the forced labor camp system, where those in opposition to the communist government were sent to be re-educated, which really meant taught a lesson about their dependence on the state, if they survived at all. Why didn't the American Revolution involve a guillotine with heads of the losers rolling into baskets, or the losing political opponents being sent to disappear in concentration camps? There is a philosophical and psychological reason why King Louis XVI and his followers lost their heads to the guillotine, and the Russian Tsar anonymously disappeared. The pursuit of individual liberty and securing of individual natural rights are not nearly as politically perilous as is the pursuit of equality in the name of social justice. Those seeking the common good in the name of social justice are often far more merciless than are those pursuing freedom in the name of individual liberty. The guillotine and the Gulag are perfect examples of what equality as the primary political ideal looks like without individual liberty having primacy. After America won their revolution, they let political prisoners go free and re-established trade with their former enemy. The French Revolution, however, required the leveling of all individuals in a form of egalitarianism, like matchsticks, where anyone's head that is higher than the rest gets their head cut off, hence the guillotine death of King Louis. The Russian Revolution saw the disintegration of individuals, like individual matchsticks, pulverized into collective sawdust, illustrating a loss of individual identity into the collective. Hence the anonymous death of Tsar Nicholas, where he just disappeared into an unmarked grave. What one would never consider doing to one's fellow man, such as the guillotine or the Gulag due to the restraints of individual natural rights, many would not hesitate to do under the governmental guise of pursuing social justice.
These violent revolutions from world history, toppling absolute monarchies, seem to have taken the positive law theory of justice off the table in vying for our allegiance as a means to unify politically. So the great conflict of our time today, then, is not whether might makes right according to the positive law definition of justice. The great conflict of our time is between the remaining two definitions of justice, natural rights or social good. The conflict of our time is all about the primacy of liberty over equality, or equality over liberty. Consider the following two aesthetic representations, the Statue of Liberty and the Statue of Lenin, each celebrating different political ideals. The Statue of Liberty represents the primacy issue of liberty and equality, held up like a lighted torch for all individual citizens to gather to. The Statue of Lenin represents tyrannical authoritarians, enabling equality over liberty through the use of force, holding up their own arm, forcing their will on everyone else in the name of the greater good of the collective. It would be foolish to think that our standing before God is strictly limited to our individual moral choices, while our political choices are perceived to be of little account in the eyes of God. Governments play a decisive role in our agency by either justly securing our rights, liberties, and equality, or denying those same rights, liberties, and equality. Our political choices affect our standing before God today just as they did in the great conflict in the pre-mortal world before we were born. As an example of this, ask yourself how well you would be able to exercise your agency or live your religion in countries such as North Korea, Iran, or the former Soviet communist regimes. Without a proper understanding of the primacy issues involved, we are likely to be deceived. Notice the political propaganda, true and false, aesthetically employed to convey certain messages. On the surface, the messages may seem similar, but on closer inspection have powerful differences. Lucifer's view of the proper role of government was through improper use of force to impose his will upon everyone else. The war in heaven was between two specific political parties, the Christian party and the Satanic party. In that conflict, we were specifically instructed on which political candidate to support. The war in heaven was divided along partisan lines over what does or does not constitute the proper role of government regarding agency and force within the primacy issue of liberty and equality. The war continues on today.
Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to the Christian Eternalism YouTube channel and visit christianeternalism.org